All right. Hello, hello. We're going to try to do this today. Got a couple of things set up and we'll dive in, I guess. Try that again. Oh, well, that's annoying. Here we go. Excuse me. Golly. Pop this out. Over here. And let's switch to this. Hey, it's Monday and it's September 16th. And I'm Rob and I'm the developer dad. And last week I got COVID and I still have it. I'm trying to get rid of it, but holy cow, this one won't let go. And I don't know how much I'm going to get accomplished today, but I'm going to try, because taking Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday off last week, it was a nice break, or it would have been a nice break if I weren't like just a zombie on my lazy boy. But I gotta keep going on this. I got stuff I want to get done. So here I am. All right, let's post what the project is all about, or at least what this project that I'm streaming about is doing. And I'll pin it. I'll just unpin that. Send that notice away. All right, so last Tuesday I got quite a lot wrapped up. And let's see here, I don't have any, I believe I even went so far as to check into main. So I'm going to flip over to the main screen here. Here we go. And let's fetch. Sorry about coughing in your ears, friends. I'm not super quick on my mute button. All right, so fetch, pull. All right. Flip to, I believe it's usage tracking is my most recent one. And we'll merge in from main just in case. And that should tell me I'm current. Yep. There are no changes. Groovy. All right, so that, I really ought to put this work on its own branch. So let's go ahead and do that. Main, and we'll spawn a new branch, and we're going to call it feature / integrate quotas and usage. Is that what we want to do? Because we kind of have a prerequisite there. Let's cancel out of here, because there's some things that we need to do. So quotas and usage. Let's rip this open here. So this is sort of a view of what the database tables would look like and the operations that we've got. And I'm using PowerPoint just as like sort of a scratch pad type thing. So let's add a new slide. Thoughts. And I'm just going to title this Organizing My Thoughts. And let's even go so far as spelling things correctly. Because just like our teachers in public school used to say, spelling counts. And some folks will say, well, spelling mistakes in your codes say that you lack care and those details are important, and if you don't take the effort to make sure your things are spelled correctly in your code, blah, 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 blah. And my take on that is spelling is important in your code because when we get sloppy with our spelling, it just makes it really, really difficult to go back and find those things later because we're expecting to find them spelled in the correct way. And computers aren't really great at identifying things that are spelled close to the way we're searching for them yet. With language models and everything like that, I'm sure that'll get better, but then we're going to have the opposite problem where it's giving us false positives. So spelling in your code matters because it makes it easier for you to find your stuff later. Full stop. And yes, some person somewhere might say, well, you know, if you can't care enough to spell your stuff right, then how do I know you're going to care about my business? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's true to an extent, but it's really just a favor to future you to make sure you're spelling your stuff right. Oh, excuse me. This cough is terrible. I'm going to go on Yelp and leave a nasty Yelp review for COVID. 0 out of 5 stars. Don't take this. So shapes. We've got our database over here, right? Cool. And then we're going to have another shape. Just another square or rectangle. And we've got our UI. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pop this guy over here. And we'll edit the text on this. Web application. And in the middle, we've got our API. And then we've got logical subsystems. And we've got a few of these, theoretically. Right now we have 2. So I'll just leave it to 2. And then, of course, we've got over here Entra. Entra is Microsoft's rebranding of Azure Active Directory. And the web app talks directly to Entra, and it does all of the other communication with all of our stuff through this API, and I want to clarify that. API for UI, aka BFF. BFF, best friends forever? No, backend for front end. And a lot of people cringe when they see that, but it's a really great way to keep my web application from needing intimate knowledge of all of these logical subsystems when the API for the UI is really just a facade. And I'm going to go ahead and we'll edit the text some more. Just a facade for the real logic. Make sense? Cool. So when the app spins up and somebody logs in, it goes out to Entra and it gets some basic information about them. It figures out, well, first they sign in using Entra, and Entra controls that whole process. So person comes in, and I bet we have a little stick figure in here somewhere. We've got a happy face. That'll do. So our person, and let's change the color on this because this is starting to look pretty monochromatic. And let's pretend they're a Martian. So our person logs in. The application says, "Do I know you?" And the person says, "Why, yeah, sure. Well, you probably don't, but Entra can vouch for me. So bounce me over to Entra. Entra checks their ID and sends back, yep, I know who this person is. Here's everything you need to know about them that they've said that you're allowed to know. Things like their ID and maybe their email address and maybe their nickname or something like that." And so the web application says, "Great. What groups are they in? Okay, great, fantastic. I can show them these choices." And based on those choices, they are able to modify the menu to show the things that only specific people are allowed to see. And then those menu items open up UI elements that actually use this API for the UI. Now, we need to be able to link items that our happy little Martian over here creates using the UI to what's stored in the database. So we need to create some concept of a user context that our web application is going to hang on to while that person is doing their stuff. So let's grab a little call out thingy. And I'll just draw it this way. And I don't want this here. I want to take this and push it over here. I'll grab this node. And I want to change the background color. We'll just make that gray. Let's highlight that and make it dark on light. Need some kind of user context object to store info about the logged in user. And that, I think, is what we are going to focus on today. because this user context concept is what's going to hold the user's ID. It's what's going to hold. We could put all kinds of information about that user into this user context object, and we're probably going to put the user context object in the GameToolsFramework assembly, because we're going to want all of these background things to have awareness of, but not ownership of that user context object. Now, we could put it in the DeveloperDad.Framework, but that user context is going to have objects or references to things that are only within the GameTools system. So that disqualifies it from living in the more vague, widely reusable framework, the DeveloperDad.Framework. But we really don't want to put it into any of the actual application logic. So that means it needs to go into the framework or utilities class or whatever. So into GameTools.Framework it will go, because all of our logical subsystems and the APIs and the supporting things will have knowledge of it. Excuse me. Or perhaps, and this just occurred to me, we create sort of a base user context inside DeveloperDad.Framework, and then make it more specific by inheriting that as a child class inside the GameTools. And that to me feels like probably a more sane way of doing things. And that's going to lead us down some really interesting paths where we start to get into some polymorphism and have to get into some extension properties using the JSON serializer and all of that stuff. So this could get a little bit fun and a little bit involved. So let's dive in. Pardon me. Ugh. It's a good thing I don't pay an editor, because I'd be paying through the nose for them to rip out all of these coughs. All right, let's clear out of here and let's start a new branch. And stop that. New branch. That's going to be feature / add user context classes. I'm going to base that on main. All right, great. Now, one thing I do want to do before I dive too far into this, pop it into here. And I want to go here. And I want to go into the GM Tools repository. And I want to see how many branches I've got. So usage tracking is one ahead. I really ought to just do a pull request on that. CSS play, I'm going to delete that. Goodbye. Get lost. I don't want to mess with the pull request on this right now. I'll do it later. All right, let's close this down. Okay, so like I said, we've got our frameworks. Here's GameToolsFramework, and here's DeveloperDad.Framework. Converters, guards, serialization, wrappers. Add, new folder, concepts. class. Excuse me. And I'm going to call this how far down the inheritance rabbit hole do I want to go? Really not all that far. Context base. Boom. And it's going to be public abstract. Defines the base attributes and behaviors of an object that can carry contextual information about the execution of a workload, process, or method. Usually, this context could be considered akin to metadata. Pretty heady stuff. Excuse me. So, private thinking. Okay. What kind of behavior does the base context need to have? Well, really, all a context object is a key value store. It's a dictionary. Or it has a dictionary of stuff. So what that tells me is we are going to have a private read only dictionary of string unknullable objects context items. And we want that to exist as soon as we instantiate our context base. And protected. Do we want protected? No. Public. Virtual. Void. Add. String. Key. Object. Value. And I'm going to change that to add item. Context items. Add key value. Whoops. Very good. And public virtual void retrieve item string key, and it's not going to be a void, it's going to be a object, nullable object. And there we go. Yeah, that'll do. Now, do context items have any kind of information about them? Do we want to limit the concept where we can have only one item of each type within our context? I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. But let's talk about what kind of contexts we can have. Add a class, and I think we should create a context item base. Just so that we can very easily identify public abstract class context item base defines the least lowest common set smallest. Common set of properties and behaviors that an item that could be added to a context basis dictionary must have. And this guy, I think, excuse me. Let's set up just an empty constructor first. And public abstract read-only string context key. Doesn't like that. Okay, it's not valid on fields. Probably doesn't like to read only. Oh yeah, of course. And what we'll do is we'll do a private protected yeah, I like that. Context key. See, by using this concept, what I'm doing is constraining myself so that I can have 1 or 0 instances of a particular concrete context item base in that context's internal dictionary of items. Because if I use this context key property as the key on the dictionary, then if I try to add another thing of the same child type to that same context, it's going to throw up because it won't know which one to use, or worse, it's going to overwrite the existing one. And that right there tells me that I've got a problem over here. And I also need to public virtual void update item string key object value and if that's what I want there. No, it's not. If context items does not already contain an item with that key, we're going to add it. Else, we are going to throw new argument exception cannot add key to the context that value has already been assigned. All right. Similarly, down here, if context items dot contains key, we can assign it. Else, let's go ahead and fix the line there. Cannot update a context item at key. It could not be found on the context object. And I am not going to assume that if that key can't be found, that I just want it added. And then retrieve item, that's fine. And then of course, these are all marked virtual because we might need the child classes to implement these differently. We've got our ContextItemBase, and I feel like that's probably enough to do here. So we know that most applications that we are going to have, I want to rename this namespace from concepts to context. There we go. And I'm going to take a second, and I think I probably have to do the harmonize namespaces. Here we are. Sync namespaces is done at the project level. Do it. And we can see that our context or our namespaces have all been updated to the new name of the namespace. So we've got those. Those are our abstracts. I'm going to add one and only one level to my inheritance hierarchy right here. And it's going to be a user context item. It's going to be public, and it's going to be abstract still. ContextItemBase. We'll fix the formatting. Excuse me. Context base. Actually, I need the context item base to see how I did this. Public abstract string context key. Thinking. Let's come back over here. I need a way to set this context key, but I'm not certain that I should set it. Oh yeah, I don't have to set it here. Okay, good. However, a user context item, all user context things are going to carry the way to identify the user, but we don't quite know how that user ID is going to materialize. It could be an int, it could be a string, it could be a GUID, it could be something completely different. So I think what we need to do is go protected public virtual object user ID. Get protected set. Get protected init. I like that better. And we'll just set that as a new object because we have no idea what it is. Pardon me. Yeah, that'll have to do. That'll be fine. So let's save that. And over in, so this is our context item base. We've got our context base. And ideally, once we're up into our application code, we'll never be dealing with these classes and properties directly again, at least not from the DeveloperDad.Framework context concepts. So I'm going to pop open, or I'm going to add a new folder over here in the GameTools framework. And I'm going to call it contexts. And I'm going to add a new class. Called ContextContainer. Cool. And it's going to be a public class. And it's going to inherit from ContextBase. Now we've got some Anger code. Because I probably need to bring in using that dot framework. Do we not have a reference? That'd be crazy. Apparently I don't. All right. Well, let's add a project reference. Right here. Save. That's what I want. Here we go. Now this one's going to be a little bit more tightly constrained. Provides a object that we can instantiate in whatever application host we need that can hold the specific kinds of contextual information we want available to the other parts of the application. And this guy, we're going to seal him. Are we? Yeah, I can always unseal it later if I need to. All right, so public. Stepping ahead of myself here. Add class GameToolsUser. Public. And it's going to inherit from our user context item. Formatting, implement the abstract class. Pardon me. Golly. And we'll seal this one as well. And we better now that I see how that manifests, I can actually get rid of the protected set. And then I'm going to come up here and pop all the way out to the end of that line. And we're going to return that. That's all we got to do there. And over on the user context item, we are going to override the virtual object, but it's not going to be an override, it's going to be a new. Public new string user ID. And this is how we harden the type, get init. And that's exactly what we want to do. So we need to take in all right. Now we're going to have a few other pieces of information here. So public string screen name. Get set. I don't know why it wants to just automatically do that, but whatever. We're also going to have thinking. No, this is the wrong place to define this. That's absolutely the wrong place to define this. But question is, do I want to extend this GameToolsUser concept farther up the chain, and then like have this 10-story deck of cards based on inheritance? Because I don't mind using inheritance where it's like a couple of properties that are just used pretty universally. But as soon as I start to add more stuff that gets a little bit more domain specific, inheritance starts to break down. Because the only things that we want to be including in descendants from an ancestor class are those things that the descendants absolutely have to have. Because unless if we start decorating it with optional stuff down here at this level, eventually we'll get into places where we've got to create exception cases where, oh yeah, well, this particular kind doesn't have that. And then you get into a whole philosophical debate, well, is that particular kind really this? And it just gets messy. So there comes a time, like in an inheritance chain, where the utility of inheritance starts to become more of a hindrance, and it's best to move over to a more composable or composition-based way of defining your models. So I think I'm just going to leave GameToolsUser as sort of like a materialized, concrete form of that user context item concept. Now for the context container, because this is a sealed class, I'm going to say public void add user context, and it's going to require the user ID. And we are going to say GameToolsUser CTX equals new GameToolsUser with the user ID. And And then we're going to say add item CTX dot context key CTX. Public void get user. Oh, it's not going to be a void. It's going to be a nullable GameToolsUser. Say get current user. And see, the context key for that is actually going to be a constant. So public const string context key. Item type ID equals name of. Oh, I probably can't use that for a constant value. Get out of here. Yes, I am sort of back. I'm at about half capacity. Half brain capacity. There we go. That's better. So my context type is going to be var CTX equals and what's over on ContextBase for my accessor? Update item, retrieve item. Excuse me. Retrieve item. It's going to be GameToolsUser dot item type ID. Oh, hello and goodbye, Mr. Frightful. I'm glad you could pop in on my not so triumphant return. As do that like that. Ah, very good. I'll hopefully be back this afternoon. I'm still in the depths of COVID right now, and I'm taking it. I'd like to say I'm taking it one day at a time, but frankly, at this point, it's 1 hour at a time. And I got up at like 8:30 or so, 9 o'clock this morning, and I was like, you know what? I'm not feeling 100%, but I feel like I want to get back at it. So here I am. Turn the context item. And you know what? I've been at this for about an hour, so I'm gonna call it for here, and then we're gonna loop this in to the Blazor UI application this afternoon, so that I can create this user context instance up there when we authenticate somebody when they sign in, and then I can start using this context concept throughout the application, because I'm going to need that user ID in different places, and not just in the UI, but also deeper into the stack. So I'm going to need to incorporate these context ideas into the requests that I make to the backend systems, as well as in the responses that those backend systems give me. So we're going to be probably modifying or mutating that op result, and perhaps creating op result's little brother, op request, this afternoon. So I'm going to go rest for a couple hours and get some fluids into me, and just sort of take care of the meat mech. And I'm going to come back at 1 o'clock, provided I have the energy for it, and we'll pick up where we left off. Thanks for popping in, Frightful 9 to 12. It's always nice when you pop in, and yeah. So have yourselves a good morning, and stay healthy out there. COVID's still kind of a suck fest. It's not like a deadly plague like it was a few years ago, but it's crappy. I do not enjoy this. I'll see y'all this afternoon.